Do I want to vote for Rishi or Keir? I'm going to vote for the moderator, actually. Hi there, my name's Colin Stone and this is Talk Shop, the series where we take an in-depth look at the presenting and the communication style of the world's big names to highlight what works and what they can still do better. This time it's the first leaders' debate in the run-up to the UK general election between the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. Let's get into it.
£2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country after all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through. That's not the right course of action. I don't know why you want to put up people's taxes.
Keir Starmer.
Paul, I just don't know how you feel when you hear a Prime Minister say, having heard what you're going...
Pausing it here because I'm going to revisit this point in just a second, but I want to see how this exchange ends.
Heard what you're going through, that the plan is working, it's all right. I meet so many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world, that
Could you, if people are struggling with their bills, why do you want to make it harder for them by saddling them with £2,000 worth of higher taxes? How is that going to make Paula or anyone's life easier?
Could you respond directly to Rishi Sunak?
This is the Prime Minister who's been part of a government that has...
Okay, this is what we call a lie unchallenged becomes the truth. What we've heard there is the Prime Minister has come out and accused Labour of planning to raise taxes by up to £2,000 for working families. And on two occasions, Sir Keir has changed his approach, and rather than deal with that claim, or as we've now heard from the civil service today, that's actually not based on anything that they've produced. Instead of dealing with that head on, he's made a different point entirely. He's gone on the attack of the Prime Minister. So what he needs to do here, and what anyone in a debate needs to do, is if something that is factually incorrect or is misinformation or simply misinformed is said by your opponent, you have to challenge that, because otherwise that lie, unchallenged, becomes the accepted narrative by the audience. And because Sir Keir, on two occasions there, failed to push back and say, look, that's absolute garbage, which is the phrase he later used in the debate, that's now the topic of conversation, the £2,000 that Labour is going to put on working families. So if you're ever in that situation, if someone in a debate, in a difficult conversation, is putting that sort of misinformation or untruths forward, you have to challenge that, otherwise it becomes the accepted narrative. Let's keep going.
They are now coming down.
7.2
Yes.
when you said you get them down, 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down. They are down, right? Yes,
Never a good sign when the audience has laughed at something you've said, but let's keep watching. It may get worse.
Yes, because the NHS was impacted by industrial action. And if it wasn't for that, £500,000...
Groaning from the audience to what the Prime Minister said there in his second response. It's a very poor section from the Prime Minister, and there's two reasons as to why. And then I'm going to suggest an alternative approach for when this comes up in a future debate. So, reason number one, his maths are all over the place. He's insisted here that 7.5 million is lower than 7.2 million, and of course the audience who went to school said, nope, Prime Minister, those sums are incorrect. So that's where the laughter came from. The second reason is arguably worse. He's gone on the attack, but to the wrong audience. He's blamed industrial action. So that is nurses and doctors going on strike because they want to be paid more. And in the world we're living in, with a cost of living crisis, with inflation still much higher and things costing more, this audience clearly sympathetic to that cause. And so when he's blamed them for part of this issue, that's where the groaning came from. So here's my suggested alternative for the Prime Minister next time. Take some accountability. If instead his answer was, I'm sorry, we are yet to fix the NHS. It is something I'm determined to get right as Prime Minister. I understand how difficult it is to be on lengthy waiting lists, and I'm committed to getting this right. If that was his response, would he have got laughter? Would he have got groans? No, you would have got maybe some muted applause. That's far better than people chuckling at your terrible maths.
That's not a plan.
Prime Minister.
How would you resolve it?
Prime Minister, your record is...
Well, no, how would you resolve it? You want to be Prime Minister. How would you resolve the strikes?
wish he had as much-
How would you resolve them?
I wish he had as much to say when Liz Truss was crashing the economy.
Could you
It's a bit of a cheap response from Sir Keir. I'm going to come back to it because there's more.
answer Rishi Sunak's point, please, Keir Starmer?
Well, I will when I can get a word in edgeways. His record is...
So that sort of line of, well, I'll answer it if I could get a word in edgeways, is the kind of response you hear from people who are losing part of a debate. Often it comes out like this. Well, I will give you my response if you just let me finish. And the audience knows that's being used to buy time. It's being used to stall because you actually are yet to formulate what your answer is. And he's now being pressed by both the Prime Minister and the moderator, Julie Etchingham, to just answer the question. So rather than resort to a cheap jibe about Liz Truss, which was, 2 years ago now, or by saying, well, if I could just get a word in edgeways, just answer the question. And it means we avoid that whole situation, which frankly reflected poorly on the Labour leader.
This year alone, 10,000 people have crossed on boats. That's a record number. So again, he's made a...
Yeah, this is nice technique from the Labour leader. He's made that figure really stand out because he slowed down and he overemphasised. He actually did it twice. He talked about 10,000 people and he said it's a record number. And the reason why you would do that is because you're much more likely to remember those figures because they were delivered in that way. If instead he'd said, this year alone, 10,000 people have crossed, it loses the impact. So you can do the same thing if you want to draw attention to a stat or a figure or a date or even just a word. Slow down, overemphasize, it means it lands with real impact. Let's keep going.
Respond directly to Keir Starmer.
Over the last 12 months, the number of crossings have down a third because the plans we put in place are starting to make a difference. But the choice of this election is about the future. I believe you need to have a deterrent. The only way to stop this problem is to say to people who come here illegally, they cannot stay and they will be removed.
Okay, I'm stopping it here because whether your feelings on the Rwanda policy are aligned with the Prime Minister or the Labour leader, Rishi Sunak here has used what we call our language of leadership, which is words and phrases that can outline your argument in as strong terms as possible. So he has said, I believe you need a deterrent, and the only way of doing this is A, B, and C. If instead we take the typically British way of making an argument, this may have sounded like, I think we should have a deterrent, and maybe one way of doing this is A, B, and C. So you can see the difference. Think, should, maybe, versus believe, need, and only. So upgrading your language, substituting out think for believe or should for need, it elevates the pitch you're making. So regardless of your feelings on the policy, this is a strong way of outlining his position. Let's keep going.
What do you do with people who come here illegally? What will you do with them? Well, very simply, what will you do with them? That's what I'm going to do. We'll have a deterrent. What are you going to do?
We need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, making a huge amount of money, putting some of the most vulnerable people in boats across the channel.
So you can see here, when Sir Keir actually answered the question, he got applause from the audience, rather than going on the attack of a track record of the last however many years. So if Sir Keir does this in future debates, then he'll come out looking better. And that's the evidence of it. Deal with the question, make your point, move on.
Because we've got to have a deterrent. What are you going to do? Just tell everybody. What are you going to do with illegal migrants who arrive?
Rishi Sunak, please, can we please, gentlemen, we will lower our voices. Keir Starmer, please respond directly to Rishi Sunak.
There's a pattern of...
Julie Etchingham's face here paints a picture, and it's one that I believe summarises the importance of remembering the audience at home. She's done a great job, by the way, across the whole debate of moderating this when, frankly, there's two grown men dead set on yelling over each other. She's attempting to keep a lid on it, reset the conversation when she can. What this tells us, though, as people going into a debate, is the audience are making up their mind whose side they're on. And at the moment, I'm on Julie's side. I simply want them to have a conversation. So that's poor for both the debaters here if the audience is actually nodding in agreement with Julie and simultaneously rolling their eyes. So let's keep it civil. Just have a conversation. Do I want to vote for Rishi or Keir? I'm going to vote for the moderator, actually.
I won't be doing is sending you on national service, some sort of teenage dad's army, which would be what the Prime Minister would say. Forget going on to university. He wants to send you off to do national service.
Thank you very much, Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak.
You know, we have an enormous amount to be proud of as a country, but we do need to do more to make sure our young people, like you, Miles, get the opportunities that they deserve. So that's why we will introduce a modern form of national service. And I think it's going to be transformational for young people in our country, giving them the skills and opportunities they need to succeed in life, fostering a culture of service in our society, bringing it together, but also strengthening our resilience and security for the future. And I think it is going to be something that's incredibly positive.
What's interesting here is the change in language. I mentioned earlier the Prime Minister using phrases like believe, need, only. This time he's back to think. I think this will be transformative. I think this will foster a sense of community. So you can see now it's a weaker pitch. If instead he took some of the language he was using with immigration and put this into national service, then at least the argument's going to sound stronger. Once again, it's got some laughs from the audience, and to Sir Keir's point, this is a good example of when an attack actually worked, because rather than it being historic or a personal jibe or something about Liz Truss, again, it's about the national service that the Conservatives have made part of their policy. So it's a good example, and it was short as well. It's a good example of when a personal attack can work because it's current, and the points you were making, whilst it was a caricature with Teenage Dad's Army, it feeds into that narrative that the Labour Party are wanting to portray here. So an interesting exchange to wrap up our analysis. Overall, this debate is a mixed bag. There's pros, there's cons for both. So let's start with the Prime Minister. His language at times is very strong. He's using that language of leadership. And also when it comes to the debating style, he is largely on top here. He interrupts Sir Keir a lot. And when he's attempted to be interrupted by the Labour leader, he raises his voice, he keeps going, he makes his point. So that is a good thing. On the con side, his maths at times is all over the place. And also he makes some attacks, for example, on the people taking industrial action, which fell flat. If instead he had some accountability, that may have played better. With the Labour leader, when he was making points about his policies, when he was talking about what he would do as Prime Minister, it worked. In some cases, he even got applause. When it failed to work was when he simply dug up the past again. And we think, we've moved past Liz Truss. I know it was something that happened, but let's talk about you as Prime Minister. So what I would like to see more of from Sir Keir Starmer in future debates is more proactive policy, more about what he would do and less about, well, if you would just let me finish, I will make my point. I trust you've enjoyed this edition of Talk Shop, and if you want to build your confidence in how you present, visit the Pink Elephant Academy. We've got a ton of e-learning courses on there, all about communication, presenting, writing, even job interview skills. And if you want to get some money off your purchase, use the discount code TALKSHOP and it will do just that. Until next time, smile and speak slowly. And avoid interrupting people. It's very rude.